Right. So what made me kind of do this a couple of weeks ago was that I feel that we are moving away from the political moorings that brought us into our nationalist period in the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that what happened in the 1930s, the the want of our forefathers to have access to better housing, better education, water services, a whole set of things that we now have and kind of are so accustomed to. Some, some generations may take it for granted, but that really our ancestors in the 30s fought, laid down life, laid down job, like really got into it to be able to map and chart what we have in the Caribbean now.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel that I would say probably since 2008, use that as a ballpark figure, we have been moving steadfastly away from that. And that is what had caused me to kind of start to think about some of what I had shared the last time. So if we go to the next slide, and I'm not going to do it all over again, but I just want to review critical pieces based on where we are now.
Mm.
So I was talking about the fact that you can think about the HH factor and its impact on politics in the Caribbean at this current moment. I am suggesting that if we look at what is happening in Barbados alone, without understanding what is happening in some of the other Caribbean countries, we're going to miss some fundamental similarities. And for the purpose of the kind of uh, investigation, put it that way, that I am doing, I am looking particularly at similarities in Barbados, Dominica, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, all countries now that we see embroiled, taking up this whole question of free movement of people. Now, if we do an economic analysis um, of these three regions, like just what we know about them,
Yeah.
as people, not any researchers or anything, just people, we would say that the economy that is doing better of the three on the screen would be Barbados. We would say that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So immediately we understand that there is a disparity, an economic disparity between the countries. And we spoke about that last week, Friday, in relation to some of the challenges that might arise. And the one that we spoke to specifically was human trafficking. So, there is the disparity, but the similarity in the three countries is that when we look at the political machinery, the model of politics that is being utilized, there is one figure, there's one kind of commonality among the three countries, and that is that they all share one political consultant, and what argue is the HH factor,
The
right?
HH. You always come up with these things. The HH factor.
The HH factor,
Mm.
absolutely. We were just talking a little bit about so I talked about that independence era, and it starts in the 1930s, and it brings us right through to this moment that we see here, right? But then we were complicating democracy, and we were arguing that a plantation was democratic too. It was just that it was democratic for those people who mattered. It wasn't
Right.
democratic for people who did not matter, right? And I was making the argument that we are back at that in Barbados and these two countries. When we look at this whole HH factor, it is a democracy, and it is a functioning democracy, but it is not a functioning democracy for us.
Mm-hmm.
That is not new, right? Because those kind of tactics have always been used in the Caribbean playbook, right? And then I was talking about the politourgeoisie, like I said, the difference between a politourgeoisie and a true bourgeoisie is that they don't come with money before the political process. They don't come with privileges before the political process. They actually use the political process and create that power and that money and those privileges for themselves. And I think that that is important within the Caribbean because for a very long time, we have been caught up in the white black dynamic in the Caribbean, and rightly so, right? Like that is the beginning of the torture and the creation of blackness in the Caribbean is the differentiation of race, white and black. But we have to move beyond that differentiation, and we have to add different kind of classes that were given privilege at different times throughout the Caribbean. And at this point in time, we have to pay attention to the politourgeoisie. And because the politourgeoisie does not have power beyond politics, because if you think about most of the leaders that we have now, when they leave politics, they don't have a job to go back to. There's nothing to go back to, right? So because they need to cement themselves, because they need to remain close and within the seat of power, what you have is that you have politics that needs to consolidate these leaders. And I don't think that they're interested necessarily in just consolidation that is traditional or that may be within the bounds of what we are accustomed to and what we know within our process of politics in the Caribbean. And I think it is important for us to understand that this is where we are, to understand that this is not just the politics that would have played out, like I said, in our nationalist period, but that we are seeing a completely different approach to political power, getting it and holding on to it, playing out in our region at this point in time.
But let me just doctor, I left the show because I went to speak with someone called me, and they asked me, is H Hartley Henry? And I said yes, and that's a lawyer, and they said go ahead and you can say the name because we can ask the question. I mean, we have done some research and we realize that Hartley Henry has worked with those three. It would appear that Hartley Henry has worked with those three countries. We've also seen from research, even online, it is there. And so I guess if it's not so, he can let us know. But based on what is there online and the research that we have done, it appears that way. And we know he's a political strategist and a very good one at that, for that matter. And it appears that he would have worked. We know he worked with Mia Motley since 2018. And it appears the Dominicans are saying that he works with them. And it appears that he worked with St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and so would Peter Wickham as well. Working, it appears that he would have worked in all three areas, and if they haven't worked, then they just need to say that they haven't worked. But online, all the articles and so on is saying that, and there's the other Chinese one that I can't call the name. But go right ahead, Doctor.
No, it is interesting, and I came back to this slide because let's talk about some of the features of the three territories. So we know, and I went through this when I did that show in terms of Dominica and its democracy, and how Dominica's democracy stopped at a particular period in time. You saw it working. It was very vibrant. They went through different parties, different formations, and that kind of thing. And then they get to the current prime minister, and the democracy ceases to work. Right? And that individual becomes not a first past the post changed over leader, but it is almost like they become it is something more tantamount to a king, more tantamount to a monarchical kind of situation. I hope that it is not lost on people that the same thing has happened in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. right? So this
How
is the
long has the
point.
Dominican Prime Minister been in power? Let's bring it
I
down
don't
to.
have it off of the top of my head tonight,
Okay,
but I'm sure that your audience can help us with that.
yes,
St.
I'm
Vincent and the
sure.
Grenadines, I think that individual has been there since 2001. That I know for sure. Um, I don't remember the day offhand for Dominica. So we have a situation where this playbook has been refined and turned into almost a science using Dominica and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It is also interesting. We said before that that Barbados will be the most developed economy of the three. But it is interesting that when we see the cessation of the democracy, when we see the
Mhm.
end of the functioning of the democracy, is also where we see the deepening of poverty in
Mm,
both of these territories, right?
interesting.
And I'm not suggesting that all of that was internal, because we understand globalization and the impact that globalization had and that kind of thing. But what I also want to signal is that when the political machinery stops working, right?
Hmm.
Somebody says Adrian Hinds there says he has been the prime minister since
Wow.
2004.
2004, so 21 years. So
and and Gonzalez has been there since 2001.
2001. So here it is, this political machinery. That same machinery, Barbadians have been working behind the scenes. These two countries that we know since it's been working
But
in
I would
Barbados.
I would argue that ours stopped working in 2018.
Mm,
And we are now on that trajectory to having these almost monarchical leaders, right? They take over. And then I think one of the things we talked about, let's come down to that slide. One of the things that we talked about was the tactics of the pillar bourgeoisie. And I would say that HH becomes the kingmaker of the pillar bourgeoisie. So he is one of the individuals who has made a living throughout the region of getting and keeping that power for the pillar bourgeoisie. So in a bourgeoisie, you have a connection to the power. If you want a shipment to come in, if you want a land deal to go through, you can pick up the phone and you can call someone and you can get that deal done. But if you don't have that bourgeoisie power to operate on, then you need to be in the seat of power, in it, at the center of it. You can't utilize it the same way as the bourgeoisie. So, in other words, look at what happens to the average member of parliament when they leave parliament in Barbados, right? Like they're not at the same level that they are when they are in power, put it that way. So
mhm.
what I am saying is that we should not lose we should not lose sight of the fact that the bourgeoisie needs to hold on to power for 21 years, for 25 years, for these outlandish periods of time that we're seeing now, because outside of this power, there's nothing to go back to. There's
Mm.
no birthright. There's no excessive and extravagant land that your family had that it bequeathed to you, etc., etc. So the bourgeoisie has to stop the democracy from functioning so that it keeps itself legitimated. And I am arguing that HH is he has taken that and made it into a science, right?
Yes.
And we have to understand that that is fundamentally different from what we had coming into the national period of the Caribbean. The national period and what we were able to achieve was because you had leaders that were trying to respond to the populace and the needs of the populace. What we are seeing here playing out has nothing to do with the populace and the needs of the populace. And I think the quicker we understand that, the quicker we can address what is happening within the political arena in Barbados, which, like I said, if we use St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Dominica, we should understand is not new and it is not accidental, right? So when we hear people crying out again for that, the 30 love and the maintenance of this one party state that we have and that kind of thing, we have to be very clear that that is a part of a well-oiled machinery. So we talked about the judiciary. We talked about the divide and conquer tactics. And I wanna talk here about the attack on the nurse, for example, a couple of weeks ago, right? We see this setting up of the good cop, bad cop, and then embroiling public discourse, embroiling the public sentiment around the issue of whether nurses in Barbados are mannerly or not, and whether people should react to them if they're mannerly or not. All of that is a tactic, right? There's a rancor within the country that stops us from recognizing that all of us are more similar than not, right? But it doesn't suit us to have that message, because what we're doing right now is not nation building, we're politourism building. And people in Barbados have to understand the differences. They're subtle, but there are differences, definitely. My apologies, just going to get my place. The manipulation of the electioneering machinery, more than the judiciary tonight, I want to talk about this one, right? I think the proposal is right now that the individuals who are gaining access to Barbados through the freedom of movement, after 6 months, they are entitled to citizenship. That is what I understand. And if I understand incorrectly, you can correct me, Marcia.
That's what I understand. There is something about a 2 year, and it will take us a little time to explain it. But what I understand is that, within a 2 year, that 2 year span, right, that you can, after 6 months, you can apply.
Right. So obviously one of the major benefits of being a citizen of anywhere is voting rights.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, I don't even want to suppose about Barbados. I want to go back to St. Vincent and Grenadines and Dominica and talk about the model of electioneering and what has happened in those countries. So in Dominica, I think I heard Maxine earlier tonight say that the current population of Dominica is around 70,000, right? There are more people living outside of Dominica who are Dominicans than who are living inside of Dominica. And one of the ways that the monarchy of the current leader has been consolidated is through using flights that bring individuals out of the diaspora into Dominica to vote at voting time.
You're getting too close. You're getting too close.
Anyway, so I was saying that many of the people who are flown into Dominica and St. Vincent, the strategy works on them because these are people who come to do, in many cases, working class jobs in the global north. So they're happy for the ticket that they couldn't otherwise afford, to be able to see family members, to be able to go back to their countries of origin, that kind of thing. Now, the Barbadian diaspora is a little different because many of the individuals who leave Barbados to come into the global north come as middle, if not middle to upper class workers, right? So they come to be professionals, teachers, accountants, various individuals that we have been able to produce and that are attractive for Canada and the United States of America. So my theory is, and this is, I'm still working it through as I see what is unfolding. This is not gospel. This is, a theory that I would like to continue to investigate. It would not be as attractive to offer the Barbadian diaspora a ticket to come home, right? They're less in need of that in the same way. And the individuals within the Barbadian diaspora, again, because of the educational level that we're talking about, the fact that they work within different governmental structures, have to adhere to different rules in the global north and that kind of thing, they can see a thing and call a thing when they see it, right? In other words, there are many of us within the diaspora that are not controlled by the laws or the absence of laws in Barbados, but because we want to keep our global north jobs, we know what the requirements are here and we abide by the requirements because you have no other choice if you want to keep your job, right? So I am thinking that with the Barbadian diaspora, the fly them in and let them vote wouldn't work in the same way. So we
Mm-hmm.
needed another tactic. So if we allow individuals to come into the country from wherever they come, and then after a relatively short period of time, they're added to our voters list, it basically means that the same strategy that has been used in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Dominica plays out, but it plays out with a slight twist to facilitate the differences in the Barbadian diaspora.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make any sense? So basically, what you need to sway the vote on the ground is bodies who are going to come in and to continue the monarchy that now exists within Dominica and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And if you want to do the same thing in Barbados, you need that same groundswell of people
Mm-hmm.
who will come and who will vote to uphold that monarchy. What I'm arguing is that because the Barbadian diaspora is different from the diaspora of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Dominica, in as far as what I discussed, like, the individuals, where they're placed in the job sector, what a $1,500 ticket would mean to them or not, these kinds of things. You
Mm-hmm.
have to find a strategy that suits the diaspora.
Right.
So to get the groundswell in Barbados, you don't necessarily depend on the diaspora that has gone to the global north in the same way that you do in Dominica and St. Vincent. You depend on groundswell that comes from other places within the Caribbean. And you shrink the amount of time that it takes for them to be able to exercise the voting right. And then the effect is the same. So
Mm-hmm.
it is the same strategy that is playing out with a slight tweak to cater to some of the nuances of Barbados.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I'm seeing. That is
Interesting.
what I'm
Yeah,
reading.
very